So I was reflecting yesterday on the question of spirituality and religion, and what is the difference, what is the similarity, how they actually potentially come together as one thing. And I thought I might share some of those reflections because, you know, I think they have been quite useful for me to wrap my hand around the difference in so many world religions, and then this seeming difference between spirituality and religion. And over the years, this has been a major confusion for me. So I thought I might share some of the findings that I've come to see over the last few years, and just I was reflecting on yesterday. So the question of religion and spirituality. So one way to see it is that spirituality is actually the nature of reality, and then the innate impulse of the soul to look for the nature of reality, to try to understand it. So the soul, or the human being in this case, has an innate existential longing to understand who it is, what is reality, why do we exist, how do we exist, in the best way possible, in a functional, harmonious way. So if spirituality is the universal reality, and then it reflects in the soul and in the human being as this innate longing to understand who it is and how life works, then religion is kind of like a set of answers, like a service to the need of the soul to understand reality. So the different religions of the world, they are kind of like a set of cultural answers that emerged in different parts of the world. And religion in this case is kind of like a service trying to fulfill the spiritual need of the soul to understand who it is and how life works. So that's one way to frame it and see how they're not opposed, religion and spirituality. And it's just that, again, religion is kind of like the religions of the world, they're kind of like different vocabularies for the divine. The different cultures have different vocabularies, right? Different languages. It's like they're different. It's like with languages, people can speak different languages and use different words, but they usually mean the same concepts. They point to the same things and ideas and issues that are being discussed. So it's like the divine is the spiritual reality, is the universal truth, and then the religions are like languages trying to describe the divine with their own flavor to it, with their own traditions, with their own specificity, given the prophetic figures that emerged and the kind of truth that they revealed and emphasized. And although I think that all like, let's say the six major religions that kind of I'm thinking of right now, the Asian religions, and then the Abrahamic religions. So we have the Abrahamic ones, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And then we have the Asian ones. We have Buddhism, Hinduism, and let's say Taoism. Of course, there's many more than that, but at least I'm thinking of these six main ones. And I feel like all of them are actually complete packages, and they are standalone spiritual pathways to God. But, and of course, a lot of people, when they are in their religion, they don't see it that way. They see it as, the only religion and the only answer, the only pathway to God, which, because they are immersed in it, they're not kind of looking out from outside at the religion and at how it compares with others, kind of like, the modern comparative religion studies that are happening, in the last 100 years, or maybe more even. Because I think religions have always kind of collaborated and compared each other with each other. But then not everybody did that. Only certain people who kind of had an open-mindedness and an openness could even have dialogues with people of other religions and exchange ideas and see similarities and so on. So these 6 religions, they're kind of like 6 different languages or vocabularies for the divine, pathways, spiritual pathways, and also basically services for the soul need to understand itself and also develop as a spiritual being. Of course, when I say all this, I'm assuming a kind of metaphysical reality where the soul is on a journey of evolution and is coming here on earth and incarnating, and usually gets born within a religion, within a culture and a certain religion, and they may stick with that religion or may move to another one. But I'm framing this as the soul being on a spiritual journey through many incarnations to develop and then eventually to transcend itself into the non-dual kind of unity or even freedom or nothingness. And each religion, while you're here, provides kind of the service to the innate longing of the soul to understand itself, who it is, why it is, what it's going, what will happen, if it functions a certain way or another way, or what will happen afterwards, after that. So religions provide I would say that they provide a complete answer, a complete standalone package. Although my sense is also that each religion tends to emphasize a different aspect of spirituality. So there's a certain emphasis. For example, in Buddhism, there seems to be an emphasis on, self-observation, self-awareness, and then the transcending of the ego through self-awareness. But the same thing actually is in Christianity, with being aware of your sins and praying, contemplative prayer. And so the same things, I would say, exist within all religions overall, in their own versions, but it seems like there's, each religion seems to have a kind of unique flavor to it and an emphasis. So, for example, Buddhism emphasizes self-awareness. Let's say Islam emphasizes, because the word Islam means surrender to Allah, to the divine. And of course, I'm not an expert. I just know enough to wrap my hand around it and kind of have an idea about it. So, for example, in Islam, my sense is that there seems to be a kind of surrender, an emphasis on abandoning yourself in the hands of God. And of course, at the same time, surrender is a phenomenon that happens in all religions, because actually all religions have a term for surrender. We have, I think in I'm not sure. I think in Judaism there's a term called bitachon, which actually means surrender. I think there's prapati in Hinduism that means surrender. So I'm not just saying that in Islam only there is surrender, but there just seems to be that emphasis. And of course, because all religions seem to be complete, they share some of the same qualities. Now, another thing I wanted to point out is that what I noticed with each religion is that it's almost like each religion comes on 3 levels, which actually reflect the 3 levels of evolution of a soul. So depending on where the soul is at in their growth, they will resonate with that level, and they may not understand and relate to the other levels. So each religion, kind of, we have 6 religions, and each of the 6, let's say, has 3 specific levels. So you have the surface level of dogma and behavior, kind of behavior management or suggestion of what to do, also traditions, things to follow, rules, and various expectations. So that's the surface one, the dogma. And then we have the doctrine, which is the theology. This is where theologians and priests and prophets and philosophers seem to engage with the religion at more the theological and kind of metaphysical level. And then we have the 3rd level, the mystical level. This is where some of the mystics who are are spiritually developed enough to experience the spiritual reality directly, right? Because before that, the soul wasn't yet developed enough to experience the spiritual reality we were describing at the beginning directly. So they had to receive, or they would only be able to relate to the surface level of the religion, at the level of behavior and dogma. And basically, this is where a lot of people who are fundamentalistic tend to feel very comfortable, and they don't even care that much about the doctrine or the theology or the details. They are very much focused on following, the rules and the words exactly as they're said, for example, in the Bible or their scripture. So if you think of religion on these three kind of levels, then different souls will relate to the level of their soul development. Some people will need the external dogmatic behavioral kind of level, and they will love that, and other people will love the theological level and engage with that, and maybe debate different people and be very kind of intellectual about religion, very philosophical, and they might have their own kind of theology and try to wrestle with truth and wrestle with God. And I think a lot of people are at that stage as well. And also, arguably at this stage of soul development, people actually can become as well, can become atheistic. Because, theology is just one way to explain reality. Science is another way to explain reality. So, there's the saying, there's the saying that if you don't understand life, and therefore you're religious, you start to understand life, therefore you're atheistic. And then you really understand life. Let's say you're developed enough to experience the spiritual reality more directly, then you become religious again. So that's an interesting way to pinpoint that at this middle stage of soul development, people can become very intellectually religious and be passionate about theology, or they can become, I guess one manifestation is atheistic and kind of try to find their truth, not in religious kind of explanations, but in scientific explanations. But I think that the next stage is less about the mind and intellectual explanations, whether scientific or theological, and more about direct experience. That's like the third mystical stage, the depth. So we have the dogma, the doctrine, and the depth, the more mystical, and that's where you could say there's no more distinction between spirituality and religion at all, because the spiritual reality is being experienced directly by an adept, by a soul, by a spiritual seeker. So yeah, I hope this gave you a kind of again a workable understanding of this topic, because for me it's been quite illuminating to start seeing it in this way, because otherwise, there's this temptation to try to figure out what's the best religion, or to say that, well, my religion is the only religion, is the best religion, and this is a bit more expanded perspective that all religions that actually are valid, and I love that I think one of the popes recently in the last few years kind of put out a statement that it's not only Christianity that is the only pathway to God, is that all religions are actually valid pathways to God. So it's beautiful that even the religious leaders are maturing in that direction, where they're kind of exiting their more quote-unquote nationalistic and like, my country is the only country, where my religion is the only religion, and they see, okay, actually your country is also valid, my country is valid, so then we can actually collaborate and everybody is included, and we're actually, like politics, speaking about politics, we're all human, and we're all trying to have a good life, and we're moving toward well-being. So it's the same with religion. It's like we're all souls and we're all trying to move toward God. So there's no need to be nationalistic, you would say. Although you can still love your country. So it's the same with religion. Personally, I was born and raised within the Christian Orthodox religion, and I was my grandmother was very religious, and my parents were kind of culturally religious. But with my grandmother, I love to love. I learned to love the Christian faith until I was like 15 or 17 or something like that. So it really touched me. So I could say that my heart is Christian. My heart is I you could say that my heart is Jesus's. Is given to Jesus because that's where I was born and raised, and I love that kind of flavor of spirituality. But I think after 17 years old or something like that, my mind started expanding and seeing, that, this is actually a lot more universal than just one religion being the only religion or the best religion. So I could say that my heart is Christian, my mind is universal, and I think my being is in the end, if you speak in a mystical sense, it is unknowable. It's not even it's not conceptual. But to the degree that we exist in this kind of manifest apparent reality, my mind is very open and universal to the value of all religions, and yet my heart feels Christian, because like when I'm in trouble, I pray to the Christian kind of version of God, image of God. And then, for example, when it comes to this mystical dimension, each of the 6 religions that I was talking about actually has its own tradition, mystical sect, you could say. So, for example, in Buddhism, the Zen Buddhism seems to be a mystical dimension of Buddhism overall. There's also Dzogchen and Mahamudra, if I'm not mistaken, all of which are trying to point to the transcendence of the self, transcendence of the ego or the soul or the subject, you could say, and lead to this non-dual oneness with reality, or as it's called in Buddhism, it's called Buddha nature. So that's in Buddhism, and then in Hinduism, let's say, there's Advaita Vedanta. And personally, I've been a kind of a follower of Advaitic teachings for the last 10 years or so. The modern version of Advaita, as it's called, non-duality, nowadays, looking for my own liberation or enlightenment, if you will, or just transcendence of the mind, of the egoic mind. Actually, with modern teachers like Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie and Rupert Spira, or the more radical ones like Tony Parsons and Jim Newman and so on. So Advaita Vedanta seems to be the mystical version of Hinduism. And then in Judaism, we have the Kabbalah teachings, the Kabbalah tradition. And then in Islam, there's the Sufi tradition. There's also reaching for God, aspiring for this union with the beloved, as Rumi beautifully puts it. And then in Christianity, we have something called Christian mysticism. There's many different mystics that have emerged over the ages. For example, Meister Eckhart is one of those. There's another material in Christian mysticism that is called the cloud of unknowing. I think the author is unknown, but it's a similar mystical teaching. And there's many different mystics actually in Christianity. I think Thomas Aquinas was more of a theologian, but I think Thomas A. Kempis was more mystical. I don't know, there's different versions of mysticism within Catholicism, and even in the Orthodox version of Christianity, there's hesychasm, which is the more mystical dimension of Orthodox Christianity. So as you can see, and even in Taoism, there seems to be a distinction between religious Taoism and philosophical Taoism, which is more about direct, kind of like jnana or jnana in Hinduism, direct inquiry into truth. So as you can see, these three dimensions are of each religion are being fulfilled by, at the surface level, by dogmatic, let's say, teachings that are directed at organizing the behavior of people. And then we have theological teachings and metaphysical teachings. And then we have the more mystical tradition, sects or versions of each religion. And they are putting forward various contemplative practices, meditative practices, different prayers that are meant to, or practices of self-observation, self-inquiry, that are meant to kind of point the attention inward and kind of dissolve the seeking subject, the soul. So all that said, I hope this gives you a big picture view of religion and spirituality and how they're actually not different from each other ultimately, and how actually religion, while being an answer to the spiritual need of the soul to find the truth, to find God, to find the spiritual reality, eventually it leads us to the spiritual reality, and it kind of outgrows itself. It's kind of like a candle that burns on the way to the sun. The sun in this case is experiential dissolution into the whole. So yeah, I hope this made some sense and was useful to you. And I'll see you in another one.